Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see everybody after a long break. I'm Paloma Sparks with Oregon Business and Industry, currently chairing the Oregon Employment Department Advisory Council. And I think I will call us to order, and then we will do introductions. I will start. Again, Paloma Sparks, use she, her pronouns. I have been more deeply involved with the employment department in the last 2 years than probably previously. But OBI represents about 1,600 employers who employ over 250,000 people. And we represent businesses from the very small to the very large. And I am interested in just being part of the conversation about the strength and sustainability of the employment department. So let's see. I'm just going to go by my squares. That might be easiest instead of everyone. Tara.
Good afternoon. My name is Tara Morell. I am the Deputy Division Director for Workforce Operations, and I'm stepping in for Jim Farr today with the Oregon Employment Department.
Tom.
Hi, I'm a person who's worked primarily in housing for many, many years here in Oregon, but I grew up in a big public housing project in Detroit. And the first interaction I ever had with unemployment insurance was with my mom standing in line in Detroit during one of the cyclical periods in Detroit. And then when I came home from Vietnam, I was able to get an unemployment check for a period of time after I came back home. So I've had a long history with unemployment insurance, but I started after college working for the Federal Department of Housing, Urban Development in personnel, and I did that for several years. I was involved in an industrial relations program in a master's program before I moved out here as a transfer in 1980. I had a lot of different housing management jobs working for the Portland office of HUD, and I concluded my career for the last 9 years. I was honored to be the HUD director here in Oregon. I've written a lot in my Oregon housing blog about various housing issues, and in the last year and a half, I've highlighted lots of interactions between the unemployment insurance program and how much money it made available for people to help pay the rent and pay their mortgage. So I'm very much interested in the continuation of not only unemployment insurance programs, but also the workforce training programs. I'd say my primary interest in public service, and in particular, is transparency and providing timely local data, which I think most agencies can improve on.
Thanks. Laurie.
Hi, I'm Laurie Westenberg. I am the controller at Madden Industrial Craftsmen. We are a staffing firm that specializes in essentially tradespeople, people who are doing manufacturing, construction, some engineering, electricians, things like that. I'm rather new to the staffing business. I am an accountant by trade, so getting exposed to all sides of it. Kind of to follow up with what Tom says, I actually was on unemployment when I was in my 20s as well. So now I'm seeing it from the other side of things as the employer. And so I'm really excited to get involved and learn more about the administration, but I'm also really excited to talk a little bit about the family leave policy and the administration of that. So that's me.
Thanks. Haley.
Thank you. Haley Alves. I use she, they pronouns. I'm an employee representative, so I'm a member of the Carpenters Union. First meeting, so I'm really excited. I learned a lot kind of preparing for this, but I'm excited to learn a whole lot more. And unemployment is just, it's a huge part of our industry. We will work ourselves out of jobs, and a lot of times, towards the end of that job, people start to get laid off. It's just kind of part of that. So it has a huge impact on us, and I'm just excited to be a part of this.
Thanks. Mark.
Hi, Mark Kresmer. I am Assistant Legal Counsel for Tillamook Cheese. Some of you have probably heard of us. Been with Tillamook for 6 years. This is my first meeting as well. Very excited to be on board and learn about the administration of the various departments.
Thanks. Curtis.
Good afternoon. I'm Curtis Barker. I'm the Self-Sufficiency Program Director for the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. I primarily administer welfare assistance, employment and training, education programs, vocational rehabilitation, and early childhood home visiting programs. We provide services in 11 different counties in Northwest Oregon, and we engage with the employment department in a number of ways, probably a little bit different than a lot of employers, primarily because we're a separate sovereign nation. And I have previous experience on the advisory council prior to the pandemic, so I'm kind of excited to re-engage.
Great. Katie.
Hello, Katie Tyson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on staff of the Oregon AFL-CIO, which is the statewide labor federation in Oregon. So we represent about 300,000 workers, and also often, I think, engage with the employment department as a voice for all workers, represented or not. So super excited to dig in more to everything on employment, OED, paid family medical leave, have been in those spaces, have been at the AFL for about a year now, but really excited to work with you all.
Great. Royce.
Hello, everyone. My name is Royce Williams. I'm an associate attorney in Brisbane, Stockton. Insurance defense, but I do tax law as well. So I'm super excited to learn more about what's
We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, Royce.
going on. Sorry. Can you hear me better?
It's a little crackly.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. I'm an associate attorney at Brisbane, Stockton. We mainly handle insurance defense, but I do employment work and tax litigation as well. So I'm super excited to be on this advisory council and learn more about unemployment and how it affects employees and employers. Yeah.
Great. Kenichi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenichi Onyagasi, and I'm the Executive Director of Professional Business Development Group, PBDG. We are a trade association of BIPOC and female entrepreneurs in construction. I'm, like Haley, new to this group and very excited to learn about the issues and solutions that we're going to be putting forth as a state. By nature of the folks that we represent, there's the underserved and marginalized communities that I really kind of bring with me as I talk about different issues and advocate in different spaces. Our business owners hire other minorities and female members of our community. So it's I'm excited about this opportunity and very interested in ensuring that there's equity built into all the recommendations that we put forth as an advisory council. Personally, I am in a second career. I used to be a commercial banker, local executive at a community bank here in town, and left that career after, almost 13 years, and am now in this new phase of my life, and will be bringing my lens as someone who's worked in community and capitalism to now the nonprofit world. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. Robert.
Hello. Sounds like we're doing intros and a little bit of background. Apologize for being late. I was somewhere else. I thought the meeting was somewhere else, and so having a hard time finding the Zoom link. But thank you for that. Robert Camarillo, I'm the Executive Secretary of the Oregon State Building and Construction Trades Council. We're an umbrella organization made up of 32 affiliate unions. We represent tens of thousands of workers across Oregon in the construction industry. And we actually, so I'm really excited to be part of this advisory council. As you know, our members experience layoffs all the time, and we are always, involved with unemployment issues. Our members rely quite a bit on that benefit as jobs wind down and finish up in certain areas. And so we string, several temporary jobs to last an entire career. And so in between jobs, our members do rely on this. So I'm excited to learn more and work with all of you. It's my first meeting, and glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the council members. I'd like to now turn it over to staff. I'm happy to call on you individually if that's your preference. Rebecca, do you have or have you guys worked this out?
I think that we should just go to our acting director, David Gerstenfeld, followed by Deputy Director Janine Beatrice.
Okay.
Thanks. So now I don't have to introduce myself, but David Gerstenfeld, I use he, him pronouns, the acting director here at the Employment Department. I've been with the Employment Department for a couple of decades now. I'm an attorney by training, was in private practice for a few years. Mostly, it was a small general practice, did mostly plaintiff's work, but besides being an employer, also did a little bit of representation of a few small businesses, particularly some startups. At the Employment Department, I worked for several years as an administrative law judge, and then for, I think, about 8 years overseeing the unemployment insurance program. Was very excited to move over to helping stand up the paid family medical leave insurance program, and then we had the pandemic. And most of the agency shifted roles. So since basically the start of June of last year, I've been in my current role of acting director. Very, very glad to be doing it. There's a ton of incredibly talented, dedicated people here. I'll make just a couple of quick comments about this group. One, a huge thank you. Really appreciate it for the people that are more familiar faces that are coming back. Really appreciate the ongoing commitment, and really value the new perspectives and voices being brought to the table. Today's meeting, I think, will likely be a bit of information overload, so I'll apologize a little bit. We really do want this to be an advisory group. And to do that, I think that it's important that we give you the context and background so that you can give us informed advice. So like I said, unfortunately, I think up front, that's a lot of us telling you information, but I hope that transitions to more meaningful interactive discussions as things go forward. We've obviously been through a whole lot in the past several years. When I talk about what we're doing, I want to make it clear that I'm not putting down or denigrating the work that the agency has done in the past. I think that it has a long history of doing incredibly valuable work. It's always interesting to hear the stories that some of you told and that many of our employees tell about having used our agency's services or those of similar programs. And they really are vital. That being said, we've been really committed to growing based on what we learned during the pandemic. And that includes being much more customer service focused. And that means a whole bunch of things. It's part of our modernization. It's part of what Kenichi mentioned of making sure that equity and inclusion are built into how we operate and the programs that we're standing up. So are really excited to have all of you helping guide the agency. I will also just highlight that we have some odd governance. This group by statute oversees the employment department as a whole. We also have by statute a paid family medical leave advisory committee, which is focused specifically on that program being stood up and operating. And then there's also a statewide workforce talent and development board that oversees the work that we are a core part of, but not by any means the only player. So we do have some overlapping governance. Traditionally, this group was really focused primarily on just the unemployment insurance. We don't necessarily want to limit it to that here, but we'll certainly flag when those other kind of governance structures or entities have overlapping interests to make sure that they're part of the discussion also. So thank you all, appreciate your help, and I'll turn it over to Janine.
Mute button. Good afternoon, Janine Beatrice, she, her. I'm the Deputy Director here for the Oregon Employment Department. I've been with this agency. I was here 4 months before the pandemic started. Prior to that, my experience and background is in public health, mental health, addictions work, primarily with young women and children, and very interested in watching how all things in Oregon are connected. I echo David's thank you, big thank you. I can already hear that your experiences are connected to your communities and to Oregon, and I'm really looking forward to Oregon benefiting from your input here, and thanks.
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Anne Friend to give her introduction, if that's okay with you.
Hello, my name is Anne Friend, and I use the she, her pronouns. I am the Director's Office Operations and Policy Analyst, and I fill the roles for the Agency Rules Coordinator, Agency Records Officer, and the Agency Policy Coordinator. Additionally, I support the Legislative Affairs team and provide administrative assistance to the Director's Office. Some of you may have seen my name with the Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance Program's rulemaking activities, or maybe the UI rulemaking activities. So you'll see my name around some, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you.
My name is Rebecca Nance. Most of you have received, it seems like, hundreds of emails from me already, I'm sure. I came to Oregon State Government after serving in Alaska for the Alaska Department of Labor and Workforce Development as first Employment Security Division Director, and then I was Deputy Commissioner of the department. I came to Oregon, and my first position here was as a local office manager before it was WorkSource Oregon. And so we had a full complement of services in Beaverton, in-person unemployment insurance. I don't know if many of you remember those days or not. And my next job was as operations manager for unemployment insurance. And I was charged with coordinating and working on moving from in-person claims to telephonic claims. And that's when we transitioned to the call center. Since that time, we've added online claims and a host of other things. I transitioned to legislative manager and served in that capacity for about 7.5 years. And then I became a refugee from state government for 8 years, just returning in June of 2020, because who doesn't want to come back to the employment department during a pandemic? There's really nothing better or more exciting. I have loved my work. I served as staff to the advisory council in my previous life as legislative manager for the agency, and I hold a great deal of appreciation and respect for the work that you will be doing on behalf of the citizens of Oregon and for the department. It's very important work, and I'm passionate about it, and I'm always here as a resource for you. So thanks so much for being here. It's been a long road for, I think, most of you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and talent.
Thanks. So the rest of the staff want to introduce themselves. I think it might be helpful for the rest of the council members. Maybe we can start with Lindsay.
Just trying to find the mute button. In Teams all day, I'm like, where is it? Anyway, sorry. Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Leahy. I'm the Unemployment Insurance Division Director here at the Employment Department. I've been here for about 9 years, serving in this role since June of last year. So to Rebecca's point, great time to step into a role in the middle of a pandemic. It's fantastic. Prior to that, I worked in benefits, also on the tax side, and I worked as an adjudicator, manager in various roles in the employment department. Before coming here, I worked in the construction industry, mostly in HR, and also did some billing, office management, and people management type roles. And so I will kick it over to Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Smith. I use the he, him pronouns. I am the agency's chief financial officer, and I have spent the majority of my life in private industry and mostly the engineering and construction world, engineering, construction, architectural world, and a little bit of time in nonprofit as well. And I was a customer of OED at our Salem office when the Great Recession hit in 2012, and the engineering world took a big hit then, like many other industries did. And so since 2015, nope, gotta go back, 2012 and 13, I've been working with the state. I have been with the employment department since 2015, so just a little over 6 years. And thank you all for joining us today. Karen, why don't you go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Hummelbaugh, and I am 5 days into my job as the Director of Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Division here at Employment. So get ready for my test, which is going to be presenting to you all about what we're doing here in a bit. But for my background prior to being here, I was working as the Director of the Office of Workforce Investments at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. I had a long history with that agency, starting out my career with state service about 24 years ago doing layoffs and closure work with dislocated workers. So I've always had a really tight relationship with our partners at Employment, back, Rebecca, to when we had on-site unemployment insurance, and lots of other things were very different back then. More recently, I've leading that department inside HEC. I worked a lot with the state and local boards, a lot with business and industry partners. I actually recognize some of you from that previous life, so this is kind of nice to see you in this environment. And so just bringing that sort of side of my experience to the table as I start this new journey. I will hand it over to Tara.
So I kind of already went at the beginning, but just a little bit more about my background. I've been with the agency for just about 5 years, started as a field office manager, worked as an area manager in Eastern Oregon, and have been in the role of deputy director for the Workforce Operations Division since about April. I'm standing in for Jim Farr, who's the director of the division today, who couldn't make it. So I hope to represent our division well on his behalf. And just excited to get to meet you all and get to know more about the goals and the efforts of this council. So thank you for having me, and I will pass it to Bob.
I think I'm last, but I'm Bob Uhlenkott. I've been the Workforce and Economic Research Division Director here in Oregon for about 4 years now. And previous to that, about 15 years in the state of Idaho, the similar role. And my informative years, though, were in Springfield, Oregon, in my middle school and high school years in the double dip recession. So that's my connection to the unemployment in Oregon, double dip recession cost my father's his contractor's job. And so we had to move to Eastern Washington. So it's those were really informative years. I'm just so great to be back in this beautiful state of Oregon.
Thanks, everybody. So Rebecca, next on our agenda was council elections, is that right?
That is correct. And my understanding is that we have one person who has shown interest in being chair of the council, and that would be Paloma. And a second person who is interested in being vice chair, and that is Katie. So if we can do those together or separate, what is the wish of the council?
I'm fine to do those together unless anybody has concerns.
I see no concern, so why don't we turn the gavel over to David Gerstenfeld as your candidate, Madam Chair, and we will take it from there.
Sounds good.
Thanks. So it sounds like for the elections, is there a motion to have Paloma as chair of the advisory council and Katie as vice chair?
I'll make the motion if I'm allowed to make the motion. I'll make a motion. Okay, I will make a motion that we appoint Paloma to the chair and Katie as vice chair.
I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. And I always hesitate to do this using virtual platforms, so we can just ask all those in favor say aye, and maybe if you can give a visual indicator, either physical or virtual also, so that we can make sure we can count. So all in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carried. So we have an official chair and vice chair. Thank you both for your willingness to do that. And then I will end my brief tenure here and hand the gavel back over to Paloma.
Thank you. So just a reminder that the vice chair will assume the position of chair and a new vice chair will be elected at the end of each term. So right now it's me and Katie.
And Paloma, I may have been overly abrupt. I can't tell. I see a virtual hand up from Kenichi, and I want to make sure that that was from the voting and not that there was a comment that I missed before handing the gavel back.
That was totally from the voting, and I apologize. I did not realize it was still up.
All right. So I think now I turn it over. I think first we have Jim talking about workforce operations for the department overview. Is that right?
Yes. Madam Chair, that actually on the agenda, the updated agenda went out. It doesn't matter what order as long as Karen goes first or second because she has some interviews this afternoon she needs to cut out for.
Let's go to Karen to talk about paid family leave.
Okay, I think there are slides. I love that I'm going first. Like I said, this is like a test in front of my bosses on day 5, and you too, Paloma, because you know more about this than me at this point, but here we go. Full disclosure, I did steal these slides from something someone else did, so hopefully I'll be able to get through this. I know that this will be a topic we bring forward to this council in the future so that you're, as we have progress, you know what's going on. There is a lot going on. I think people are aware with a lot of transition in staffing. We are still moving forward on all of the policy recommendations, et cetera, but just wanted to give people a little bit of background about paid family and medical leave insurance in case you're unfamiliar with it or just haven't been tracking it. And so next slide, Anne, or is it Anne? Are you the one? Okay, thank you. First of all, this is a brand new program. It is really a program that is brand new to the country. And we are one of just a few states who have this type of program. There are a lot of variables between the states that have paid family medical leave insurance programs. And we are sort of in this second group of states. There are some people who came before us. A lot of them had existing disability insurance programs. And then there are sort of a new group of folks who are implementing now and are in this kind of cohort with us. And those include Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Colorado. And so we're learning a lot from the folks who've come before us. And also we are sort of out on our own because all of them are different. And I think that Oregon looks at itself as being taking from all of the different ones and making sure that we have the best coverage and the best concepts taken from everyone else. There was some discussion at the federal level that we might get some paid family medical leave insurance program in one of the federal pieces of legislation, but it looks like that is not probably likely to happen at this point. So Anne, go ahead with the next slide. There was a slide in here that had the old deadlines in it, but I'm just going to go with here's the new timeline for you all and when we will go live with both contributions from employers and benefits out to individuals. Because of the pandemic, the department did request a change in the original timeline that was approved. And so that has been moved back. So I know some people still have a little bit of the old timeline in mind, but we are quickly moving in on the new deadlines, which are going to happen in 2023. I did not know that was in the slideshow anymore, so none of those. If you can skip to the one that says about Oregon, about the Oregon program. Okay, perfect. Thanks. You guys will get all these too, so you can read this more thoroughly. Just again, full disclosure, I might not have made such dense slides for content, so I'm not going to read all of this, but it is here for you to review. And again, we'll come back. But basically, we have most businesses are considered covered, but there are some exceptions. The federal government is not covered under this program, and tribal governments can opt in essentially. And self-employed people can also opt in. The kinds of workers kind of match that by, again, federal workers not covered, independent contractors are not required to be, and in order to receive benefits, you have to have earned 1,000 in a base year. One of the conversations we're currently involved in is actually like what constitutes the base year, so we'll tell you more about that as time goes by. What is covered under this type of leave is listed here as well. But it's essentially, medical leave for something that is a serious health condition for the person, family leave, which includes birth and adoption, et cetera, or caring for a family member who has a serious condition, as well as safe leave, which is all about folks who need to take time in order to deal with sexual assault or domestic violence or other things that they are working through in order for them to get things back on track. Next slide, please. Okay, so what kind of benefits are available is that you would get 12 weeks of paid leave. And I have got to say that I am not as familiar with all the intricacies here, and so I don't want to say too much that would, and David, you can come in and if you feel like I'm not giving enough information, but I know we're supposed to just be at the overview level. But basically these are benefits that can occur while a person is on their FMLA or their OFLA, like we're being able to take the leave. The benefit amount is determined based on their average weekly wage. And also, I think on the other side, on the contributions, I already went through the timeline that has changed. A couple of really important details here, I think, for this group is that the rate of the contributions is set at 1% of wages. I think that's 1% of the payroll. And then the contributions for this are split between employers and workers, so 60-40 split. And if you are a small employer, which is defined as fewer than 25, you don't pay the employer portion. David, before I move on, did I miss anything that you would have highlighted there as I went through quickly?
No, I think you have it. The only thing I would add is on that contribution rate, we're kind of assuming that it may be up to that 1% cap the first year, because we'll be collecting enough to repay all the startup costs. But that is an upper limit on what the payroll contribution can be, and it gets set each year, kind of depending on how solvent the paid family medical leave insurance fund will be.
Okay, Anne, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so this is the last dense slide you'll see, but basically this talks about the fact that we have equivalent employer plans where employers can actually provide their own plan. And there are a lot of details to what that looks like and what that means and how that will work. Small business grants are also something that is inside of this statute. And this is available to small employers who are opting to pay in. And so again, the details are there. And then there is an advisory committee for this group. As I mentioned, Bloom is actually one of those members. There are 4 folks who represent employee interests or worker interests and 4 who represent business or industry interests. And so that group has been meeting actively throughout the implementation and will continue to do so. They are advisory as particular to the rules and ironing out of all of these details. Okay, next slide. A couple of other things that are actively happening inside this division. There is a contract we have with Brent Communications. This is really all about how do we engage and have outreach with both business and industry, as well as individuals and worker organizations and community groups, in order to help people understand what is this program, what's going to happen, when will it start, but also really to get some potential stakeholder input. We're talking a lot about what modalities of communication do we use for this, with the contractor working on what surveys and face-to-face, well, I guess, I don't know if they'll be face-to-face, but anyway, interface with people to get their opinions about things, and to make sure that we're really understanding what all the needs are so that we're including those. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to create something that really works for our customers. And so we want to make sure all the interfaces and all of those things are working for both of our customer groups. So next slide is part of that.
Karen, Robert has his hand up.
Oh, so I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking at the pictures.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So do we address the chair with questions, or is it okay to just address Karen?
Just go ahead and ask Karen.
Okay, so on the employer, back to one of the slides on the percentage, you said it's a contribution that's 60-40 between the employee and the employer. I wasn't sure who pays the 60 and who does the 40. How's that decided?
Okay. David, I hope I get this right. See, this is one of those test questions to make sure.
No, not at all. I'm not as familiar with it.
Not you. Well, neither am I. So let me just try this on and see if I do okay. But my understanding is that it is literally what it sounds like, but when we're putting the money into the system, it is a shared contribution. And so that's where that 60-40 split comes from.
Yeah, it is. So like, for instance, the first year, or if the contribution rate were to be set at 1%, that upper cap that it can be, then the employer has to withhold out of the paycheck the worker's portion, but the worker is actually paying for 60% of the 1%. So they would have a 0.6% contribution. The employer would pay the other 0.4% contribution.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to, yep, that one looks good. So this is just, I wanted to demonstrate for you that one of the things that we want to make sure, again, is that there's ease of use for both kind of customers, for the employers and the folks who are going to be doing this as part of their payroll and their taxes and all of that, as well as the individuals who need to receive benefits. We have decided that this will be part of a rollout that is larger and a modernization effort that is happening. And so there will be a combined modernization effort. And Francis is the name of that system. And I think that's because of Francis Perkins, who is like a person who helped with the founding of the Department of Labor. And so I think that's where that name comes from. And So this is just a mock-up of maybe what an initial portal will look like in the test environment, but really the point of this slide for me to share with you is that we will have combined contributions for unemployment insurance and for paid family medical leave insurance for folks who have to be doing those taxes. This next slide just kind of goes along with this, which is that we do have, like I just mentioned, we are in tight moving forward with our partners at modernization inside the agency. And so we're making sure that we're working to create an interface and a modernized system that works for not just paid family medical leave insurance, but also for unemployment insurance. There are a lot of stakeholder and external engagement plans that are happening, and we are continuing along on project plans for modernization. I assume those will be things that you will hear much more about in the future. Next slide. This is really just, we have a lot of rules to put in place for this program, as you can imagine. Anne mentioned that many of you may have heard from her because we are beginning batches. The batches of rules kind of are in categories essentially, and our goal is that we will have all of the batches through all of the rulemaking process by September of 2022. And while that sounds pretty expansive, we're talking about dozens and dozens of rules and lots of stakeholder input and a lot of massaging of what that looks like and a lot of definitional work. And so that's what that looks like in terms of workload for the rulemaking for this program. Next slide. This is just a list of what's next, which I think there's probably, you know, you could go really on and on with the what's next, but there is a discussion about whether we really need to further define the benefit year and make sure that we all understand as partners and that it's very clear either in the statutory change or in the rulemaking process how our benefit year aligns with things like OFLA and FEMLA. We're also looking at, are there other statutory alignment pieces or anything that was missing in the original writing of this bill that needs to be cleaned up? Obviously, Francis, that's sort of the modernized portal and all of that. We have all of that development, the rulemaking I just talked about. The outreach and engagement is super critical to all phases of this. And so that's obviously happening. And I guess I will just leave you with, the last slide has a bunch of links. So at your kind of leisure, if you'd like to look at those, you have them in your packet. But I will say that some of my goal is I need to be doing a lot of hiring and getting the team and keeping us on track for the project plan, but everybody has all the confidence that we will be able to meet those deadlines, and we will just bring additional items forward to this group as we move forward. David, I will just throw it to you if anything I missed in that quick overview that you think the council would benefit from.
I think you got it all in 4.5 days already, so.
Thank you. And I assume, I'm also, everybody probably will say this, but the slides are coming out. You'll have our contact information. If people have individual questions, please reach out to me and we'll figure out a way to get those answers to you as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Karen. All right, now that I'm looking at the right agenda, I will turn it over to Tara to talk about workforce operations.
Hi, thank you. Today, I will be sharing with you our division's contribution to the workforce system through the programs and services that we provide to Oregon employers and job seekers. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We engage with WorkSource Oregon, which is a network of various public and private partners that work together for the common customer, the Oregonian in our communities. No one entity owns the WorkSource Oregon brand, but rather it's all of the partners that engage in the workforce system that represent and uphold this brand in our communities. The employment department is one of many partners in the network. Each one of the partners involved oversees one or more workforce programs supporting both businesses and job seekers with the resources that they need to succeed. Our partners include Bureau of Labor and Industries, Higher Education Coordinating Commission, Oregon Department of Human Services, Oregon Commission for the Blind, Oregon Department of Corrections, local workforce development boards, Oregon Youth Authority, and vocational rehabilitation. And then we also engage various community partners that are specific to our communities throughout Oregon. Our vision with the agency is an Oregon where meaningful work enables the state's diverse people and businesses to realize their full potential, creating prosperity in every community. So within that, the Workforce Operations Division, we support and execute the Public Labor Exchange, which connects job seekers with employers. So between July 2019 and December 2020, you can see on the left-hand side, we served 176,872 job seekers. And in that same time frame, on the right-hand side, you can see that we served 7,357 employers. So making the best connections with getting the right skilled workforce to the right place to support the economy through our employers and businesses. Workforce operations staff are funded by Wagner Pizer, and we're responsible for the state's labor exchange services, like I mentioned. We help Oregon job seekers and claimants find their next job, and we customize recruitment services to meet the needs of Oregon businesses. This just kind of lays out the organizational structure of our division within the agency. So we have a total of 561 positions. Within our division, we have a central office unit that supports all of our field offices, which you can see branch out across 9 regions throughout the state with offices, local offices, WorkSource offices in each of those regions. This puts that last org chart onto a map of Oregon so you can better see how we're laid out to support the state. We have 39 WorkSource Oregon centers with OED staff on site in each of those centers. Our regions, 9 regions, are aligned with our local workforce development boards. Those are indicated on the map with the stars. All of the other red circles are WorkSource offices. The local workforce development boards convene workforce partners and resources in each of their regions. And we work together hand in hand to respond to the needs of local businesses and job seekers in all of those counties and communities. On April 7th, 2020, date that we will all remember for a very long time, WorkSource centers closed our doors to the public for in-person services due to COVID-19. We still provided services to job seekers. We just were doing it in new and innovative ways, as well as supporting the rest of the agency with the other priority work that we needed to accomplish. We reopened our center doors to walk-in traffic on July 28th. And so now we have all of our centers that are ready to receive walk-in traffic in our communities and assisting both job seekers and employers with in-person services. that first 5 weeks that we were closed in 2020 to walk-in traffic, really our WorkSource center staff stepped up to help support the influx of incoming calls around just needing information about what was happening in the world and potentially unemployment insurance benefits. I think in 5 weeks, we received about 73,586 phone calls. So a lot more call volume than we were used to handling, but our teams did a great job stepping up and managing the demand. This just shows some specific data per local WorkSource office in terms of individual job seekers and businesses that we served, again, from the time period of July 19 to December 2020. So you can take a look, again, these slides will come to you. You can take a look if there's a particular area that you're interested in, seeing how that breakdown shakes out by region and office. So
can I ask a quick question? Sorry, I know it's hard to see the hand raise function.
Sorry.
I'm just out of curiosity, and it's okay if you don't have this answer. Curious on that last slide, you know, some of the smaller places in Oregon, I think it was like Hermiston, 9 employers, 300 workers. Would you say that all of those workers were essentially going to those 9 firms in terms of the jobs, or like just like, I guess, like a little more narrative on that breakdown sometimes would be super helpful.
Mm-hmm. So I think you were maybe looking at Enterprise, which has 9 employers and 311 job seekers. Is that on the left-hand side?
Yep, that is what I was looking at. Okay. Sorry to the people of Hermiston and Enterprise.
That's okay. I happen to be from Eastern Oregon, so I know the layout of your particular question fairly well. So Enterprise is a small community in Wallowa County. So most of the employers in that county really are going to be state employers, school systems, hospitals. The tourism drives that county a lot more than like industry. So it is fair to say that of the 311 job seekers, most of them probably engaged, well, I wouldn't say most, but they probably engaged with the 9 employers that were there. That county could potentially also interact with employers that would be attached to like the LeGrand office, which would be the neighboring county and the next quote unquote biggest area in the region. So where you see a disproportionate number of maybe a small amount of employers and a higher number of job seekers could be that it's just related to the size of the community, and that community might engage more with employers at the next closest populated town.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
David, did you want to say something?
I was just going to maybe ask a clarifying question that I should know. When you're looking at that data, I assume that, because I know that the WSO offices have some work that is focused on helping the individual job seeker, and then also the business services orientation. So when you look at those columns, could some of the workers be getting help and actually even be getting placed employers, but the employers wouldn't have been employers that we were necessarily reaching out to help them recruit?
That is correct. So that
Okay.
it's not a correlation between job seekers and placements to employers that we had maybe recruitments or job listings for that we were serving. Thank you for the clarifying question. So some of the key programs that we execute through our division and through our centers across the state, you can see them all here. It's a mix of programs that serve specifically job seekers and some programs that specifically serve employers. Our claimant reemployment or reemployment services and eligibility assessment, that's RESEA for short. Our intent with this program is to help claimants find suitable employment more quickly by having individual and customized conversations that are really focused on sharing resources that job seeker might need and setting job search goals to help them work through their job search and towards reemployment. Our veterans programs, we provide a priority of service to persons having served in the military or if individuals are a spouse of a veteran. So priority of service would include priority referrals to jobs and other employment and training services over non-veteran applicants that have similar qualifications. And so we support our veterans through those programs. Our trade adjustment assistance helps employers avoid layoffs or assist businesses and workers when layoffs occur. So this program is designed to reduce the adverse effects of foreign competition felt by various sectors throughout the US and Oregon economy. The goal is to get workers trained and hired in new jobs or new industries. So if they've been affected by a layoff because that work has gone elsewhere, then that program wraps around and gives them the skills that they need to be a viable labor pool in other industries and regain employment. Our work opportunity tax credit is a program, oh, sorry, back to, I'm not quite finished with the other slide, thank you. Incentivizes businesses to hire job seekers who have barriers to employment by providing tax credits when qualifying individuals are hired and retained. So some of those eligible populations that could receive a tax credit would be veterans, TANF and SNAP recipients, which are ODHS supports, disabled individuals, ex-felons, and long-term unemployment recipients. Our SNAP training and employment program is focused on helping job seekers. This is focused on the population of food benefit recipients. And so our main goal here is to engage them with training support or job search support to help them find new employment or skill up and grow their careers, and with the goal of providing self-sufficiency and earning higher wages for their families.
Tara,
yep. Do you need me to go faster?
No, Kenichi has her hand up.
I have my hand up, and I'm wondering if you answered some parts of my question with the SNAP explanation. I was going to ask you about workers that are looking to transition or change careers. Where would they fall in the spectrum?
So we would, it really depends on what other programs or assistance they might be receiving from other partners or other community partners. So for example, in the SNAP training and employment program, we partner or contract with Oregon Department of Human Services for delivering their training and employment programs to individuals that are receiving those benefits. But of course, we would provide training and employment services to anyone who walks in the door, even if they're not a recipient of SNAP or one of the other target populations. So that really is a conversation when someone enters our centers. We just start asking questions to get a feel for what the needs are of the customer and get them to the right place. So within the network of WorkSource Oregon, we would make sure that we could connect them with training partners if it was GED or some kind of skilling up or training needs that they had, or connecting them with resources that they need to be able to set career goals, or just organize their job search strategies. So there's a variety of programs that we could connect them with, as well as partners, to make sure that their needs are met.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Just quickly, we have a connection to apprenticeship. So that is really to, get paid while you learn, connecting with employers that might have hard to fill positions that need a lot of training to go with it. We can connect job seekers that might not have the training but are willing to learn. And when we find that partnership, and can do it through an apprenticeship, it works out well for both the job seeker and the businesses. Migrant seasonal farm worker program. We provide outreach work to the agricultural industry and support farm workers with the resources that they need, making sure they have safe working environments, as well as supporting employers to make sure that they are set up for success to provide good working conditions in the fields. And then our foreign labor certification is really focused on employer support, which is making sure that employers exhaust all efforts to fill positions with US workers before they bring in foreign workers. There's two parts to the foreign labor certification program. We have H2A, which seeks to address shortages of seasonal ag workers. And the H2B program seeks to address shortages in non-ag sectors of the economy. So, sorry, it's a mouthful, there's a lot we do. Our areas of focus have been and will continue to be for our division, being more innovative in the way that we engage with our customers, with our offices closed to walk-in in-person traffic during a large part of the pandemic. We had to shift and adjust and learn new ways of connecting and engaging with customers in our communities, both employers and job seekers. So we've shifted to a virtual service delivery model, which is giving us the opportunity to engage with individuals or businesses via Teams or Zoom or something face-to-face like we're doing here, which has allowed a lot of flexibility and opportunity to serve even a greater variety of customers. For example, back to our smaller communities, if someone is having transportation issues and can't drive the hour from their little community to the nearest WorkSource center, they can now engage with us in a virtual environment. So we're really excited about the potential for this service delivery model and method in our business model going forward. We are also focused on working with folks who are unemployed and are likely to or have exhausted benefits. This is through our RESEA program, and engaging those claimants early and often to get them reemployed quickly, so that they don't exhaust benefits and we can return them to work. This is a partnership with our unemployment insurance division. And we work closely with our unemployment insurance division friends and delivering the services through the WorkSource centers, setting career goals, providing labor market information and anything that those job seekers might need to get reemployed. We have partnered with LinkedIn through our business services program. Again, this has been a new and innovative way for us to engage virtually with employers and job seekers throughout Oregon. It's really proven to be an effective tool in connecting job seekers and businesses. We've done a lot of virtual hiring events and job fairs and connecting employers and job seekers in a networking kind of a way through LinkedIn. We're excited about this partnership and continue to look at other ways that we can utilize LinkedIn to better serve both our employer and job seeker customers. And then our scheduling tool. We have revamped our website to make it more user-friendly. Again, through the need to engage customers also in a virtual world versus just in person. And so we have a online scheduling tool that allows customers to engage with us when it's convenient for them, set appointments, plan out their week. They can go right into the scheduling tool and say, you know, I've got time on Monday at 2 and I want to come into the center and meet with someone or maybe connect with someone in a virtual space. And they can do that and makes it a lot easier and more convenient for them. So we're very excited about using that in our business practice as well. I'm going to cut it short. Yep.
Got a couple of hands up. I'm not sure who was first, but I've got Kenichi and Robert.
Kenichi, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. Mine is kind of a bigger question. So we're hearing quite a bit around kind of the hesitancy to come back to work. And as you have identified these 5 areas that you're going to be focusing on, when a worker is faced with the opportunity to work, but is choosing not to go back to work for whatever reason, kind of what is the strategy around that to motivate people to go back to seeking employment? And then has the conversations been happening, right? So I'm from the small business perspective, a lot of the folks that we serve are talking about people who are eligible to work and certainly able to work, just not wanting to work, and really wanting to kind of stay on unemployment for whatever variety of reasons, whether it's childcare or whatever it is. And this is a bigger question. I'm not sure if this is the space to address or the time to address it. Is any of those considerations built into the areas of focus that you've just identified, and how does that kind of trickle through the rest of the work that will be done?
So I'll answer kind of broadly. I think there are others on this call that can also answer parts of the question in terms of unemployment insurance and from a research perspective, what that information is telling us. As it pertains to my division and our areas of focus, I think the overall theme is creating new and innovative ways to engage with our customers and individuals in our communities. And so everything looks a little bit different post-pandemic, and learning what individuals' motivations are to either be engaged in workforce or not, and how do we get back out in front of our communities in new and different ways and engage with individuals in a way that they're wanting to engage with us, and see if we can outreach in more effective ways than maybe what we needed to do pre-pandemic. So I don't know that I have a specific answer to that question. I think that's probably the $1 million question right now is how do we get out and engage with individuals that have maybe disengaged at the current time. And our areas of focus are really around trying to figure that out and being innovative in the ways that we engage with our communities.
This is David Palomo. If it's okay, I might be able to add a little bit from kind of the cross-program perspective for the agency. I think Tara's exactly right. And some of the specific things that her team does, like the RESEA, the reemployment services, they are meeting one-on-one with people to find out if somebody isn't going to work, why, to really identify what those barriers are. When I look at that really big, grand question that you asked, I think there's kind of 3 ways that our agency's work intersects with it. One, you'll hear Bob talk, but a lot of it is just trying to understand what is going on in the labor market. So I'm sure he'll share because he knows it incredibly well. There are some longer term structural things that are creating challenges for businesses finding the workforce they need. There's also a lot of barriers that have been around and maybe came more to the forefront during the pandemic around childcare, things like that, where people are trying to get back to work, but there are real barriers. That's really the sweet spot where our agency can help out by using research to help identify them, reemployment services that can really offer supports and strategies to help people overcome the barriers, and then providing the unemployment benefits to help tide them over until they're able to re-enter the workforce. There is that program integrity perspective also, where if somebody isn't facing barriers or really could be back in the workforce and is just choosing not to for whatever reason, if they're just not wanting to go back to work, they shouldn't be getting unemployment benefits. And these aren't simple things to discern all the time. And that's why that focus on the one-on-one discussions to really understand what the barriers are. If they're trying to get back to work, we want to help them, support them with benefits, and help them overcome the barriers. So really big questions, but I think at a high level, that's how our work kind of intersects with it.
Thank you. That's great.
Chair, thank you. So mine is kind of also kind of a bigger, maybe it's a comment or a flag just that I'm raising. For job seekers, right? As I hear more of this shifting towards online and available, partnering with LinkedIn and offices closing for physical, for people to physically go into these places, what is being done to address the barrier for people that maybe English is a second language or live in rural areas that are used to going to these offices and maybe don't have access to internet or Wi-Fi, right? Like, because those are all services that some people struggle to maintain when they're working. So I know that there was a lot of people that lost those services during the pandemic when they weren't, right? It was either Wi-Fi, internet, or food on the table. And so is there any talk about, potentially offering job seekers access to free internet or to use some of these services online? Because that's a barrier, especially for, even in the construction industry, right? We represent a lot of people in rural areas. And, I get to travel around the state and visit with a lot of workers, a lot of different folks. And so I struggle sometimes when I'm in rural areas to connect or get a good cell. So I can imagine people that live there with not having a public, a physical office to go to. So I'd like to hear and maybe this isn't the right time, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there because I see that as a barrier too, as people are unemployed and seeking jobs, so.
Sure, I can try to give you a fairly quick answer because I think I'm probably way over my 10 minutes. But so first, let me reassure you that our offices are still open. And so customers can come in and engage one-on-one with us. We have computers, phones, that kind of equipment in our offices. So if individuals aren't able to engage with us in a virtual manner, we are absolutely still here and able to provide those services for them in the same way that we could before the pandemic. I think the focus around the virtual services is because that's the new thing that we offer. We haven't replaced any of our existing service delivery methods pre-pandemic, and we haven't moved away from those, but we've added options, I think, is kind of our main focus for ways for customers to engage with us. In some of the rural communities, we have our local workforce areas have been fairly innovative in terms of partnering with libraries and providing access to computers and that kind of thing for individuals that might not have that in their own homes or have access to them. And then through our SNAP program, we also, for individuals that are eligible to provide those or to receive those services, we do have ways that we can support with providing tablets, laptops, and supporting Wi-Fi if necessary to help with training and job search goals.
Thanks, Tara. Rebecca, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let the council know that the broader issue of high-speed internet connectivity has been a topic at every regional solutions advisory council meeting that I attend all of those for Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, the Willamette Valley. The entire state has a regional solutions advisory council, and particularly not the metro areas, but this is being discussed actively by those advisory councils. So that might be a good way for our council to connect with those other councils, because they have been talking about ARP money and other money available to make rural Oregon more connected with the rest of the state and the nation and the world. So those conversations are happening. The only other thing that I want to say to augment Tara's comments is we do have language line interpretive services that we use not only for our unemployment insurance claims folks, but also for anyone who wants to access our services through the WorkSource Oregon centers. And if someone gets stumped about how they can access our services, we have a universal access coordinator with the department, and we always find a way and how to meaningfully engage with one of our customers, whether it's someone who's sight impaired, hearing impaired, English is not a first language, or other barriers. We figure out how to serve those folks.
Kenichi, is your hand still up from before, or? Okay. Thank you so much, Tara. So we will then go to Bob to talk about research.
Hey, Bob, you're on mute.
So are there any questions? I apologize for that. It's been 19 months and I still make that mistake. My slides are pretty dense, as Karen said, and but please use them for reference. I'll try not to talk too fast. I typically talk too fast because there are a lot of interesting things in the data. I'll talk a little bit of how we're set up, a little bit of our kind of performance outcomes that we have, and then close with, I'll kind of pretend to be an economist for the day. As a director, I don't get to do this kind of thing very often anymore, but so I get a little excited when I get to talk about the actual economics. We'll go to the next slide, and this is kind of how we're set up in research, and you can just read it from left to right. It's kind of organized in that way. Our foundational surveys, it's a federal state cooperation with the federal government. You may have seen this morning, the October jobs report was out. I saw that President Biden already had a press conference on it because the numbers were really good. 531,000 new jobs, and the unemployment rate ticked down to 4.6%. So that's that federal state cooperative data that we produce. We'll produce Oregon's October numbers on the 16th. That's typically the second Tuesday of every month. Most of the states put it out that the second Friday. We push it up a little bit because we think it's really important information, and so we really effort to get it out on that second Tuesday of every month. And we're really looking forward to what our data might show, because if you recall, the September data, actually the jobs contracted by 200 jobs. And so it was really kind of a weak month. And so we're encouraged by seeing the federal numbers, and we'll see what happens then. The next box kind of talks about the analysis, and it kind of takes those foundational 4 core survey employer and household surveys and take it and make more use of the data, frankly. You may have noticed yesterday the department put out a press release on our annual long-term industry and occupational projections. I'll talk a little bit more about them in another slide, but that's that kind of next level of using those core surveys. Really important work that tends to inform the next decade and for how the jobs, the industries, and the occupations, how we see them shifting, how many we think that we'll add in the next decade, and what have you. The next the business side is who we serve. We serve a variety of customers and stakeholders. And one thing I always like to mention here is we have workforce analysts and regional economists spread all throughout the state to kind of give that local and community flavor to the data. And those data are also on our website, which is the next box, one more to the right, the systems. You might be familiar with qualityinfo.org. If you're not, boy, that could be your best friend. It's just loaded with all kinds of data. I'll briefly talk about that in a minute. That's our labor market information web delivery system. So you're able to go there and self-serve yourself. If you don't want to self-serve yourself, you can use our workforce analysts and regional economists that are spread all around the state, or our genius Gail Krummenauer, who I know some of you speak to often, and talk about the trends that's going on at the state and local level. And lastly, talk a little bit about performance. We have something called the Performance Reporting Information System, PRISM, and that is where we have our outcomes data on how well our programs are doing and how fast and how many jobs people are being employed at what rates and what have you. And we do have demographics in that system, which is a really great way to kind of study through who we're helping the most and how well we're helping them. And I want to mention too, on that last box, we have, just in research, we have about 100 data sharing agreements with our partners, because we do hold that universe. It's about 90%. It's considered the universe of covered employment in the state. And so those employment outcomes are not only important to us and to our customers and stakeholders, but all of our partners as well. And the other divisions have many sharing agreements as well. If you go to the next slide, the top section just kind of talks to some of our major research projects that we produced in the past couple of years. In fact, we just published the disparate impacts of the pandemic recession in Oregon. A year ago, it was the expansion to the pandemic and that kind of severe drop. And now we've talked about how it's impacting people differently across the state, and our most vulnerable populations were impacted worse. And so that report goes into those details. And you can see below the section below the 2021 to 2023 focus there. We're going to focus on communities of color and the demographics of the unemployed. We're going to continue our data sharing efforts to help out our partners. The third bullet, I want to focus on that. I just mentioned it earlier, our annual long-term industry and occupational projections. And you'll notice that annual is bolded and underlined. And we are in Oregon, we do produce those annually. And this year, we're really thankful we did, because a massive change has shifted in the economy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But and those are projections that have a base year of 2020 and project out to 2030. And those are really popular a lot, especially for educators, because they're developing their curriculum. And so they want to know which industries, which occupations are growing, which ones are declining, and then which instructional programs need to be developed around that to kind of fit that demand. And so I just wanted to mention that is annual in Oregon. A lot of states don't do those annually. They do them every other year. We're particularly thankful this year that we made the decision a couple of years ago to produce those in an annual fashion. And again, those were published yesterday. And in a minute, I'll show you where they are at on our website. Let's go to the next slide. And it's kind of our products and exposure slide. I see it got kind of messed up on the slide there. But you can see the wheel, you go around the wheel there, and it's how many exposure we have. You might wonder, how do we do this? Well, we're data geeks, so we kind of collect data on the data we give out and we share. And in October, we do a census. And our division aren't too happy in October because they have to keep track of every little thing we do, and we extrapolate that out to the year. And so you can see that it's almost 2 million contacts we have with reports, publications, and electronic newsletters, and our distributed material. But you can work your way around the wheel and see the presentations we make, the information requests we get. Qualityinfo.org, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, and you can see it off to the right there in this slide, is our main exposure to the data we have. And it's just a really wonderful tool for mining data. So if you want to mine labor market information, that is just wonderful. Also, the services, the general people that we serve, the number one group is the government, state, local, and federal government. Business and business associations, the next largest group. Education is next. News media, economic development, and workforce boards are those groups are the most served by our labor market information shop. For the next slide, you can kind of get a picture of what our front page looks like. It's actually, I sent these slides in a few days ago, so it's the article carousel has already shifted a little bit with some new data. But you can look across the top of qualityinfo.org, and there are about 50 doors. You see there's drop-down boxes, about 50 doors, just unbelievable opportunities to mine workforce and economic data. And I'm going to highlight the economic data, the third tab to the right. If you hit that tab and you get a drop-down box. At the very bottom are the projections that we produced yesterday. And so if you kind of wanted to know how to get to them quickly, it's the bottom door on that economic data. You can see that there's an article carousel there, and we had an article on the truck driving industry. Occupation, and of course it's very you've seen all of the challenges and logistics these days, and how that's an important sector. In the long haul with driver, the trucks will drive themselves, there'll be a shift, but it's still a massive need, and it still rises to the top of the list. And in those projections, I'll briefly share with you. I think we said there are well over 300,000 new jobs over the next decade. If you dig a little deeper in the data, that's about 2 million. That's more than 2 million job opportunities because of the churn and the aging population and the aging workforce, which I'll close with in a minute. Let's go to the next. Stick with this slide for a minute. In our tool, with this COVID, you can see up to the left, there's a COVID-19 page we can go to that we for the first time, we published unemployment insurance claims data during this crisis. We typically ignored a lot of the claims data because they were really poor indicators of the economy and labor market information. In fact, sometimes unemployment insurance claims can tell a different story than that's what's really going on in the economy. Well, for 3 months, I never thought I would say this, but for 3 months in my career, the labor market information produced by our foundational surveys were useless, and unemployment insurance was the only useful data to kind of measure the economy because things were happening so fast. And so we pivoted and produced some of the unemployment insurance data on our LMI site. And I think we're going to leave it there. Talk to my colleagues across the country. Most all of them did this, and most of them are starting to remove those tools. We think they're pretty valuable, and so we're going to keep our unemployment insurance tools on there, and that's in that COVID-19 section. Below this red truck, this article, go to the next slide. There's one of these more interesting tools that I think we've produced. The next slide, please. In a tool that compares the Great Recession to the pandemic recession. And I'll wait to see that slide turn over. And this is below, this is a little farther down right on the front page, and just kind of a really neat tool. And this just gives you some perspective. You might remember the Great Recession as being the greatest recession of our lifetime, and so severe. Look, that's the line in blue. This is just overlaps the Great Recession in blue and the pandemic recession in red. And this is, you can see above, there's a drop-down menu, and I've chosen total non-farm in this tool. So basically the whole economy. And you can see where, you can see that in the pandemic recession, the so-called square root recovery, it's starting to look like a square root, and it's probably will continue that path. We certainly hope it doesn't last as long as the Great Recession. The Office of Economic Analysis thinks that will recover next year. So there is some, we think that will continue down this positive path. But one thing I kind of want to note, if you look out 27 months in the blue chart, this was the Great Recession, and that's where we really troughed, or we peaked in unemployment, was 27 months out. And look at the pandemic in red. We peaked in 2 months. And so you can see the amount of time. I look at Lindsay on my screen here, the amount of time Lindsay's team had to prepare for a recession that was twice as deep as the Great Recession in 2 months, rather than 27 months of slowly kind of getting to the worst time. Now, certainly we're hoping that we're recovering significantly faster. Well, then the next slide shows that not all industries were treated equally in this pandemic. This is leisure and hospitality. You can see in the Great Recession, leisure and hospitality didn't take all that big of a hit. In this pandemic recession, it took a massive hit, and we're still quite a ways off to recovering those jobs in leisure and hospitality. And we're starting to see some progress in the recent months, and so it will probably keep that square root recovery. But you can see it was a little bit of a blip in the Great Recession in that industry, but in this pandemic recession, it was massive. And the next slide, I clicked the drop-down box and chose transportation, warehousing, and utilities. And you can see in that slot, in this one, they actually were only down in that second month, and then had a really quick correction as compared to the Great Recession. And really what this is all about is we were all shifting from a bricks and mortar in-service consumption model to now a point and click model. And we were already headed that way. I mean, everybody knows Amazon was cruising along pretty good before the pandemic recession. But the future of work just was pushed forward so I have an argument with my friends, 5 to 10 years. I still think it's about 5 years, because there are some things that set back a little ways. But for the most part, the future of work, the point and click technology. I mean, how many of you ordered food on an app before the pandemic? I know my daughters did, and they'd show me, hey, you can just go order a Domino's pizza. I'm never going to order on an app, I said. Well, now I've got like 5 apps on my phone where I order food. And so this point and click commerce has just been pushed forward significantly in this environment, and it's just faster. Go to the next slide, and I'm going to start moving along a little bit. This is one of my favorite slides that shows unemployment. This kind of gets to where we try to serve all localities, and you can see this is the unemployment rate, and it goes from the highest to the left to the lowest to the right. And you'll notice the little red hashes. Those are the worst, or the highest unemployment rates since 1990. So this is 1990 to today. And most of those red hashes were from the pandemic. Those bumped up quite a bit. When I showed this slide about 10 or 15 months ago, all of those blue bubbles, which is the current unemployment rate, was right up there near the top and pushing and breaking those records for most of the counties. For some counties it didn't, but for most of the counties it broke the records. But you can see that we're recovering pretty fast in terms of unemployment. You talked earlier about the workforce shortage, and I'm going to close with a slide on that. But the unemployment rates, it is trending down, and we don't have the October data yet, but we will in the 16th in a couple of weeks. And I expect it to probably continue that positive trend. And hopefully we have a similar kind of jobs reinfusion of vigor as the national numbers that we had today. The next slide is just another kind of perspective slide that talks through the Great Recession. You can see the pandemic recession, which is the farthest blue or the farthest red to the right. You can see that that's significantly greater than the Great Recession. It used to be in this scale, we showed this chart, the Great Recession took up the whole scale and went to the bottom, and it just flooded everything out. Now you can see the pandemic recession makes the Great Recession not look that bad. The last slide is my favorite slide. This is the one slide that I think really can, if I had just one data point to look and kind of forecast the next 10, 20, 30 years, this is the slide that I would use. And I heard Kenichi talking earlier about the workforce shortage and not having enough workers in the labor force. This, back in 2008 and 9, you can see that light green bar, that's the natural increase. So that's births minus deaths. We started to see that go down, and we started to talk workforce shortages way back in 2009 and 10, and said that would be our biggest challenge in the workforce system. The thing that made it better was the net in-migration into Oregon, you can see was well over zero. So anything above the bar, so even the light shades, even though they're trending down, it's still a positive natural increase, but it's going down. You can see that the in-migration was really significant, and that's starting to trend down a little bit, which has me a little concerned. Because one of the biggest challenges when I talking about the workforce shortage years ago, we had to be really careful because you don't want to be insensitive when you have hundreds of thousands of people without a job. You don't tend to talk about there's going to be a workforce shortage, but there was already that pressure, and the pandemic just really is now exacerbated with the childcare, healthcare issues. All of those, the Delta variants, it's just made it significantly worse. I do think you're going to continue to see that natural increase or decrease, that trend. We are the second oldest state west of the Mississippi. Only Montana is older than us. And so there's going to be that natural pressure. Our median age is about 39, and Montana is not that much older. It's just, half a year older. But we are one of the older states in the West. If you relate that to compare that to the rest of the country, the Northeast are significantly older. And so, but a lot of the migration has been West and Southeast. And so we've really benefited over the years with that migration because we are having an aging population. And then the pandemic on top of that's just really exacerbated this workforce shortage. And so that the attractiveness to a diverse economy and a diverse workforce to move and come to Oregon and provide that fuel to the economic engine is just so important. As you can tell by our long-term projections we just produced yesterday, we're pretty optimistic that we will continue to get that in-migration and that fuel to fuel our economy and adding, netting over 300,000 jobs in the next decade and creating almost 2 million job opportunities for people phasing to new jobs or retiring or moving out of the state, and there'll be other opportunities. So these are some of the labor market information that we provide. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about what we do. And if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll help you out.
Thanks, Bob. I always find the research division incredibly helpful and ask lots of silly questions, but you guys always find a way to help me. Lindsay, I think you're next.
I am. It looks like Robert has his hand up. I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bob, for the presentation. Very helpful. A lot of information. Did you capture any information on the construction industry, on what kind of job losses we saw in the construction industry during the pandemic, and what kind of growth we're seeing Yeah, I don't, you showed 2 slides. I don't know if you included that in the transportation, warehouse, and other, I remember the third classification, but I was just curious if you collect data on the construction industry.
Yeah, most certainly. And we're really bullish on the construction industry, and I'm actually trying to pull it up right now on our on quality info, because it's on that first page. You can screen down, and it's a real easy to navigate tool. Waiting for it to load here and looking at construction, but we're really bullish on the long term for construction. One of the great things about construction too that I've always said is at the training level and the livable wages they tend to beat a lot. So the return on investment for training and apprenticing into the construction sector, the return on that investment is immense because they tend to produce livable wages. And I'm looking at the construction. Construction's almost back to zero, back even. And so construction's performed significantly better than most industries. And compared to the Great Recession, it really was massive. But the construction jobs are kind of leveled off, are just about to break even from pre-recession levels.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I don't see any more hands now. So now I'm going to turn to Lindsay.
Thanks, Paloma. Yeah, Robert's right above me in my window, so it's easy for me to see him. Anyway, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit about the Unemployment Insurance Division and what we've been working on. Next slide. So the unemployment insurance, or UI program, is a temporary partial wage replacement for unemployed workers. Typically, the program provides up to 26 weeks worth of benefits in Oregon. However, this changed during the pandemic, where program extensions and newly created UI programs provided up to 75 weeks of benefits. Eligibility for the program is not dependent on need. At a high level, to be eligible for benefits, individuals need to have worked enough hours and earned enough in wages to qualify. People must also meet weekly eligibility requirements, essentially that they are looking for work, able to do the work that they're seeking, and are available to accept work when offered. The program not only helps workers, but also helps communities they live in and helps to mitigate a downward economic spiral. Unemployment benefits can also help keep trained workers in the local area to be hired again once economic conditions improve. In Oregon, there is a close working relationship between the UI and workforce operations divisions, along with the greater workforce system and our partners. This is not the case in many states, so we're really lucky here in Oregon. We work closely with our workforce system partners. So the UI program provides that economic safety net, but we also help people have less reliance on that safety net by helping them get back to work faster. Next slide. So the UI division has 3 primary functional areas. The unemployment tax section collects quarterly wage reports and collects employer payroll taxes that are used to pay UI benefits. This is an administrative process that we share with the Department of Revenue and the Department of Consumer and Business Services for our employer-facing tasks programs. This combined payroll reporting process gives employers a more streamlined way to file payroll-based taxes. The second area is the unemployment insurance benefits section, which pays benefits to eligible unemployed workers. We investigate potential claim issues as they arise and has a group that is specifically focused on preventing improper payments, finding them when they happen, and also doing collections work. The unemployment policy section focuses on the federal quality control and compliance programs and other technical program analysis and training. The UI division is typically smaller than our current size. Originally, we had about 500 planned positions for the 1921 biennium, but due to the large influx in claims in 2020 and continuing through 2021, we made several position adjustments and are now looking at around or over 2,000 positions for the 21-23 biennium. On the next slide, unemployment benefits is not just one program, but an umbrella of programs. The largest number of people are typically covered by regular unemployment insurance. In Oregon, we also have a number of smaller specialized UI programs represented by the smaller circles there on the wheel. One of them, for example, is WorkShare, which allows employers to keep skilled workers during slow times by reducing work hours and earnings. And then workers receive a portion of their UI benefits to help compensate for the wages lost due to the reduction in hours with their primary employer. On the next slide, you can see that during the pandemic, the UI program expanded to include a host of pandemic-related unemployment programs, such as Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA. And those programs provided additional benefits and benefits for workers not traditionally covered by the UI program. The regular programs with the red highlighted text off to the right were very significantly changed in 2020 due to the pandemic recession. And although the time period covered by the federal programs has now ended, people can and are still filing retroactively for those weeks, and there is still a lot of work that remains to be done. On the next slide, you can see the UI program is a federal-state partnership with the United States Department of Labor. Oregon businesses pay a payroll tax. The Employment Department collects the money, and it goes into a federally held UI trust fund that is used to pay benefits to workers. The federal government has a framework of requirements for state UI programs, but there is room for state policy decision-making and innovation. But we are very careful to stay within that federal framework. And the reason for this is Oregon businesses receive a federal tax credit against their Federal Unemployment Tax Acts, or FUTA, obligation, and we received the UI administrative grant that we use to run the program. If we were not consistent with federal requirements, Oregon businesses could owe about $1.3 billion more per biennium in federal payroll taxes. Next slide. So I want to take a moment to talk about the UI Trust Fund, where employer taxers go and that we use to pay those UI benefits. Oregon has an elegant statutory self-balancing system for funding the trust fund that is highly regarded nationally. It looks at a number of factors and focuses in on what we call an adequacy ratio. Essentially, how prepared the trust fund is to pay benefits during a recession. The adequacy ratio determines which of 8 tax schedules we're in. 8 is the highest, 1 is the lowest, and 4 is what we call equilibrium. Within each tax schedules, businesses have different tax rates based on their experience rating. And so this federally required concept means that the less a business's workers uses the unemployment system, the lower its UI tax rates tend to be. So experience rating is required by federal law, and Oregon caps the rate at 5.4%. So that is the max rate in any of the Oregon 8 tax schedules. And it is also the lowest permissible rate that can satisfy the federal conformity requirement. So about 40 states have maximum tax rates above 5.4%, ranging up to 18.55%. So there were also changes implemented as a result of the passing of House Bill 3389 in the 2021 session, but I'll be going into those later on in the agenda today. So next slide. Since March of 2020, we have faced many challenges and seen a lot of changes, much more than I can present on one slide, but I did want to highlight just a few items. So our biggest challenge of last year was the sheer volume of work that flowed into the UI system. This extraordinary challenge was compounded by years of inadequate federal funding, legacy technology and processes, sophisticated fraud schemes, and the complexity of adding new federal programs into an already intricate web of UI programs. And all of this happened during a global pandemic and a historic wildfire season that not only affected the work we do and how we do it, but impacted our hardworking and dedicated employees on a personal level as well. So besides implementing multiple new federal programs, we also modified several programs and promulgated temporary rules due to the passing of the CARES Act. We waived the waiting week, we hired and trained, procured equipment for, and set up system access for hundreds of employees. We went from about 100 people processing claims in early March of 2020 to over 1,000 people performing that work in a few short months. We reassigned hundreds of employees from other areas of the agency to help process claims and assist our customers. We enlisted the help of the Oregon National Guard, volunteers from the executive and legislative branches to help do outreach with claimants, and we hired contractors also to help us work through pieces of the claims process. We implemented several bills passed by the Oregon legislature to increase access to benefits and help combat fraud. We created new communication channels with our online Contact Us form, some chatbots, webinars, online videos, and more. We also increased limited access for limited English proficiency or LEP customers, translating most of our UI benefit information into 15 languages. We rolled out an email portal strictly for LEP customers so that we could communicate in the customer's preferred language. And we collaborated with a local workforce board to stand up LEP hotline and greatly increased our outreach to LEP communities, including creating videos, radio spots, and webinars in non-English languages. This next slide, I won't spend a lot of time on. It just displays some of the major changes that happened during the pandemic to the UI program, and you can look at that later with when Rebecca sends out the slides. Next slide. This chart is another one that shows, this one shows the number of people that received unemployment benefits and the benefits paid each year from 2000 through 2020. So similar to Bob's slides, you can see there in the middle where the Great Recession happened, and you sort of had that 27-month uptick, and then about 4 years, that long tail, and then off to the right, you can see that sharp spike, which is the pandemic recession that basically hit us overnight. Next slide. So this slide shows a comparison of 2020 and 2021 by the people we served. So we collected millions in payroll taxes and collected millions of wage records that we use for our program and also for the research division. We also paid a lot of benefits to unemployed workers. The employment department paid out more money last year than we had paid in the prior 10 years combined. And in 2020, on average, we paid out more money in benefits each month than we would typically pay in an entire year during stronger economic times. So far in 2021, we have paid out significantly less than last year. However, it is more than double the work that we did in 2019, and the year still isn't over. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, lots of work remains, and not just for UI, but for our IT teams, HR, and so many other areas of the agency. We are continuing to hire and train employees to keep pace with the high workload and the retroactive federal programs and guidance. Additionally, we need to circle back and provide training on more subject areas to our staff, something we didn't have time to really do during the high pandemic peak workloads. We are focused on anti-fraud systems and sharing what we learn with other states so that we can more effectively address the national fraud problem. We are working on modernizing our legacy processes and systems, and we have significant process improvement work that is prior to modernization that we have going on right now. We are taking the lessons that we learned during the pandemic to improve our service delivery and overall customer service. We are committed to constant improvement, and we want to keep implementing strategies to serve our customers more timely and accurately. We also want to continue improving upon the communication channels with our customers, building on the success of the Contact Us forum and other improvements that we made in 2020. Next slide. So the unemployment rate right now is about 4.7% compared to 13.2% in April of 2020. We are processing initial claims within 7 days, about 97% of the time. The majority of those are processed within 4 days of receipt. We are making first initial benefit payments within 21 days, over 77% of the time. We do continue to struggle with adjudication, but we have made great strides in quality and in timeliness, and we are continuing to improve. Phone wait times have decreased significantly. We are answering more calls than a year ago, and we're doing that in under 15 minutes, more than 94% of the time. And items that are received through our contact online form are addressed within a week, over 95% of the time. And so thank you so much for listening. That was a lot of information, and I just really appreciate all of you taking the time to be part of the council. I think we might have a couple of questions before I kick it over to Mike.
We've got a question from Tom.
Yes, I do have a question. I was looking recently at the report section of the unemployment web pages, and I counted something like 30 different reports, and I've used those reports a lot over the last year. And my question is there any special timetable or work plan to kind of take a look at those reports and trying to update those so that they're current and or reorganize them so that they're easier to use?
And are you talking about where we had all the federal reports posted?
Yes. Yes,
Okay. I know we expanded and added media sections and all sorts. More reports during the pandemic. So I just want to make sure. We hadn't talked about that, but that's definitely something we can look up at, how to streamline that part of the site. Obviously we were focused on the unemployment section and then on the workforce operation pieces of the webpage to help communicate more clearly with our claimants and employers, and then just highlighting points of interest through webinars and the press releases and media briefings and such. But yeah, we can definitely look at how to take those ETA reports, probably not make them more easy to read. They are federally required, and so we're kind of bound by that, but maybe organizing it in a different way. If you have specific feedback, we'd be happy to hear it.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Don't see any other questions. In which case I will turn it over to Mike.
Well, excuse me, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Smith, the agency's Chief Financial Officer. I get the pleasure of presenting budget information right before break time. So hopefully I'll either keep you awake and you won't fall asleep, because numbers are interesting, or at least I think they are. So let's jump right in. I will be talking about our 21-23 budget, which runs from July 1 of 21 to June 30 of 23. We're going to dive into a lot of different information. I'll try to be brief, but yet give some information about our structure, budget context, revenues, and expenditures. So next slide, please. As you've heard earlier this afternoon, the agency has about 4 primary divisions. Well, we do. Workforce, unemployment insurance, research, and of course, the new paid family medical leave insurance. Those programs are supported by multiple shared service areas, as depicted on the right-hand side of this slide. And overall agency leadership is provided by our director's office and an executive team. We have 3 separate advisory bodies, this being one of them. Those are represented in the upper right-hand corner with the 3 green boxes. You'll also notice we have 2 programs in the upper left side. That's the Employment Appeals Board and the Office of Administrative Hearings. These programs are independent of the agency in their respective programs and functions, yet they're housed administratively in the Employment Department for shared services support and budgetary purposes. In total, for the 21-23 biennium, the agency has just under 3,300 budgeted positions. Next slide, please. As CFO, I also oversee a shared services group called Administrative Business Services. We provide through 4 core units, we provide services to the agencies such as property and risk management, procurement and contracts, budget and policy items, and financial services. ABS does a range of services for the agency. We also act as a liaison to a variety of stakeholders, including multiple divisions within the Department of Administrative Services, the Legislative Fiscal Office, and property owners, vendors, and contractors around the state. Next slide, please. Turning our attention to the budget, I first want to convey some of the context for which we are operating under in our 21-23 budget. A key component to our budget is that we manage our expenditures to our revenues. Our revenues fluctuate, and yet we aim for a 90-day operating reserve. As Lindsay mentioned, our UI trust fund is solvent, even amid the pandemic, a time when many other state trust funds were not solvent and they had to borrow funds. Oregon did not have to do that, and we remain solvent. We have 3 agency-wide priorities: conduct our core programs, modernize our processes and systems, and implement our paid family medical leave insurance program. And most of our programs are federally based. They operate with federal funds on a reimbursement basis, hence the operating reserves, and they're supplemented with other funds. Our policy packages directly relate to our agency priorities and operations. Next slide, please. As some of the prior speakers mentioned, we have expanded and contracted due to economic conditions. In managing our expenditures to our revenues fluctuate with the economic need, and correspondingly, our staffing does as well. Staffing being one of our being the largest agency expenditure. For historical perspectives, this graph shows the number of employees over the last several biennia. We manage staffing to meet the needs of employers and job seekers based on economic drivers at play and available revenues. And you can see from this area that some programs are more impacted by economic factors than others. For example, the red band represents unemployment insurance, the green band represents workforce operations. At present, those are our two largest programs. The graph also shows the impact of the Great Recession. You've heard Bob and Lindsay talk about that impact. You can see that that peaked in the 09 to 11 biennium from a staffing perspective. And you can see the subsequent recovery and lower staffing levels in the 15 to 17 biennium. The line across the top of the graph indicates the number of positions approved by the legislature. And sorry, I need to back up. Not to mention, of course, when the pandemic hit in 1921, as Bob showed in some of his graphs as well, that also, we responded to that, and that was the highest peak for the agency in the last multiple biennia. The light line across the top of all of those graphs indicates the number of positions approved by our legislature. And you can see that that may lag occasionally as we wait for points in time where we get formal approval to actually go to have those. Next slide, please. Taking a more granular look at positions, you can see how positions are spread throughout the organization in areas we provide services. Roughly 59% of our staff support unemployment insurance programs. 17% provide employment services as part of the workforce operations group. 2% perform research activities. About 2.5% are dedicated to our modernization work. 7% are shared service functions, and just over 9% are dedicated to implementing paid family medical leave insurance. As mentioned earlier, the Office of Administrative Hearings is housed within our budget and represents approximately 4% of our positions. The Employment Appeals Board is also housed within the budget, but it's a smaller group, and we didn't show it separately in this presentation, but we do obviously account for that separately. Next slide, please. The Employment Department services are supported by several revenue streams. As Lindsay mentioned, the largest revenue stream is an employer-paid payroll tax that is deposited into the UI Trust Fund and held by the U.S. Treasury. Oregon's trust fund is self-balancing. It's a formula-based system for setting tax rates, and these funds go directly to paying UI benefits. That's represented by the light blue section of the larger pie. The smaller pie shows the major revenues that are used mostly for employment department operations. Our operating revenues are generally dedicated to specific programs or services, such as for the UI division, they have a federal UI grant, research, they have a Bureau of Labor Statistic revenue, employment services might use Widener-Pizer for labor exchange, special programs for targeted populations like trade assistance, veteran, and federal labor have their dedicated resource. Unfortunately, federal funds are insufficient to provide the services we need to supply to Oregonians. Thus, we rely on other funds to make up the difference, not federal funds. Like CDAF, which is collected along with the UI taxes at a rate of 0.09% of payroll subject to those taxes, or penalties and interest, which is revenue earned on delinquent UI taxes, and that's typically used for the UI programs. Paid family and medical leave insurance, it uses a combination of general fund. We have a general fund loan for the setup. The combination will be later in this biennium when they start collecting contributions. Those will be other funds to support their business operations and pay benefit costs. Modernization is primarily funded through federal funds that we received during the Great Recession. Many states had to use those funds to pay benefits. Because of Oregon's Solvent Trust Fund, we were able to save the vast majority of those funds for our modernization efforts. We're using those now as we implement that system and have a vendor on board. The majority of charges for service revenue support the Office of Administrative Hearings. So you can see we have a composition of different revenue sources. The majority of that is federal, but it's insufficient, and therefore we need these other funds to help cover the cost to support Oregonians. Next slide, please. This chart shows a high-level overview of our expenditures over the last several biennia. You can see the expansion and contraction. We'll talk a little bit more about that. They reflect changes in the economy, especially the unemployment rate. The dark blue and lighter blue portions of the graph represent direct benefit payments to unemployment workers. You can see that's the majority of the expenditures. The small green and orange segments depict our operating revenues, our operating expenditures. Prior to the 19 to 21 biennium, our costs had remained relatively flat over the last 3 biennia. And of course, when compared to prior biennia, there was obviously a substantial budget increase in 1921 due to the pandemic response. And our budget for the upcoming biennium, now 21-23, not 23-25, remains higher compared to the last few biennia prior to the 1921. Federal programs are supported by federal grants like the Weidenpeiser and UI administrative grant that I just mentioned. And those funds are on a reimbursement basis, hence the reason why we need the operating capital. And federal funds don't obviously fully support serving Oregonians, and we rely on those other funds to make up the difference. The underfunding of federal programs has and continues to be a challenge for the agency, but we are used to expansion and contraction. It just constantly remains a challenge for not only Oregon, but other states as well. Next slide. Looking at our budgeted 21-23 expenditures in terms of the fund types that support them, our total expenditures are roughly $6.8 billion. The bulk of that, 79%, or just over $5 billion, is what's other funds. That's the large light blue section. And those are primarily supported by employer-paid unemployment insurance taxes. 20% of our expenditures are supported by federal funds. 1%, less than 1% of expenditures are supported by the general fund loan. As Lindsay mentioned, our programs are state-administered federal programs, and we receive a general fund loan to support paid family and medical leave insurance and the implementation activities around that program. Next slide, please. If you look at our expenditures another way, still equating to the total budget of $6.8 billion, this time by program, approximately 91%, or the bulk of the budget, $6.1 billion, is money that goes out as benefits paid to unemployed workers. Our 4 major programs combined, UI unemployment insurance, workforce, research, and paid family medical leave, comprise about 6.8% of our budget, or about $460 million. Our shared services and the modernization combined comprise less than 2%. That equates to about $124 million. And the Office of Administrative Hearings makes up the remaining amounts. You can see the specific amounts in each section of that graph. And obviously that will be maybe more legible when you actually get the handouts emailed to you as well. So I know they're a little small on my screen. So I know that's a lot of information. Next slide, please. Sorry. I know that's a lot of information to take in and absorb. Some of the numbers can be quite large. But I appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide an overview of our 21-23 budget, talking about our staff size, our federal and other fund sources, and how those fund our expenditures, the programs we use to serve Oregonians. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions or follow up if needed later. And I see Tom has a question.
Yes, just a curiosity question. You know, there's a discussion about this Build Back Better bill. Are there any provisions in that bill that would provide additional money to the department and specifically to help you administer the programs?
I can take that. There's none that I've seen in the Build Back Better bill currently. The exception, I haven't looked in detail at the most recent paid family leave. Most of the versions of that have been put forward lately have let states that they're calling legacy states, which would include Oregon, that have a program on the books, continue to operate the state program that they're operating or building and get some federal money towards benefits and administration. Don't really know what that would look like. We have been repeatedly having discussions with and certainly advocating for the funding levels that are needed to provide services in the way that we think they're needed, but we haven't seen kind of more robust funding in the federal legislation yet.
Thanks.
All right,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It looks like on the agenda, we were supposed to start with Anne's update overview of public meetings law, but it's 3:11. If we wanted to take a break right now, does that make sense, Rebecca? Anyone?
I defer to you, Madam Chair.
All right. Let's take a break now and we'll come back around 3:25 and then we'll start do the public meetings law.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. right. I think we can get started. I will turn it over to you, Anne, to talk about public meetings law.
Okay, thank you, Paloma. Today, I'm going to be providing you a high-level overview of the public meetings law for Oregon. This overview has been taken in part from the Department of Justice, or DOJ, Attorney General Public Law Conference Training, and from the Oregon Revised Statute that governs public meetings. I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly so we can get on to other important information, but this is stuff that you guys as a council should probably be aware of. So next slide, Jessica. The purpose of a public meeting law is to give guidance to governing bodies to help ensure that the public is able to participate in these meetings, and so the governing bodies are providing transparency regarding decisions or recommendations that are made by the advisory council to the director of the employment department, for example. The public meeting law can be found online for free at the link on your screen. And we will be sending out a PDF of the public meeting law with the minutes so you have easy access to it. It's also available in print should you want it on the DOJ website. Next slide, please. There are 5 basic elements to the public meetings law. Meetings must be open to the public, must be noticed in advance of the meeting with topics listed. Votes will be done publicly and recorded, and meetings must comply with any ADA requests. I'll touch on the noticing piece in a few minutes. Our meetings are open to the public and are noticed on the state's transparency website. Minutes will be taken along with the meeting being recorded to ensure that we have a complete record of the meeting. And any ADA accommodation requests will be handled promptly to the best of our abilities. If you have to vote on an agenda item, and if there are any nays to the vote, then we will have to call a roll call so that we make sure that we get everybody's individual votes to the correct members on the council. Additionally, if we need to vote, we have to have a quorum in attendance. So luckily today, everybody's present and that wasn't an issue. Next slide, please. When deciding which meetings are subjected to the public meeting law, DOJ has recommended some questions to answer in order to help us decide if we are holding a public meeting or not. The first question we ask is, what type of entity is holding a meeting? The definition of a governing body was pulled directly from the statute. Next slide, please, Jessica. This advisory council is a public body, and therefore you are subject to public meeting law. Of course, there are many different things to evaluate when deciding if a meeting is subjected to public meeting law. Next slide, please. The next question DOJ has encouraged us to ask is, what type of meeting is being held? Not all meetings are covered by the public meeting law. Is it a staff meeting within an agency? That's not a public meeting. Is it a rule advisory committee meeting? Those are also not subject to public meeting law, even though we as an agency do treat them as a public meeting. You as an advisory council will fall under this public meeting law because you are all tasked with making recommendations to the director of the employment department on a variety of topics. The definition on your screen is pulled directly from Oregon Revised Statutes definition. Next slide, please. During the DOJ training that was just held this last month, meetings were described as information gathering sessions, meetings that are held so the public can be informed about what a public entity is making recommendations or decisions about. Next slide, please. Oregon Revised Statute 192.640 outlines the requirements for noticing public meetings. We are not given specific timelines for noticing. The statute says we shall give notice that is reasonably calculated to give actual notice to interested persons, including news media, which requested notice. I don't know about all of you, but that's really confusing to me. So I've asked DOJ many times over the years, what does that mean? How do we calculate what a reasonably calculated notice is that gives, time for everybody to attend meetings? And I always get the answer that it's up to the individual agency to decide what that time period will look like for interested parties, the media, or the members of the public that we serve, to have sufficient notice ahead of the meeting in order to travel and plan in advance to attend. Now that we're in a virtual world, travel may not be necessary, which has made this noticing process much easier for a lot of agencies. But just so you all know, we will be noticing the meetings for this council at a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of the meeting to allow time for the public to be aware of the meeting. And if anybody needs to arrange schedules or a place to attend because they can't attend maybe in their home, or they don't have that kind of access readily available, we want to allow time for those different levels of participation. Next slide, please. ORS 192.640 further outlines that the meeting notice will have a list of topics to be discussed, deliberated, or decided on, along with the date, time, and location of the meeting. We have also put on the notice, we also have to put on the notice if an executive session is being held. If we were to hold only an executive session, the statute does not indicate, the statute does indicate that we must include in the notice which provision within the ORS authorizes the executive session. And I'm not going to go into that a whole lot because historically the council hasn't held executive sessions, but I just want you guys to be aware of that. Also, our public meetings are all posted on the public meeting website. That link is on your screen. And the rulemaking meetings for the agency are also on that website. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about the minutes for the meeting for a minute. The same statute for public meetings says we have to take minutes. We have to list who attended, all motions and outcomes of the votes, including who voted yes or no if there isn't a unanimous agreement, and list any public records we discuss that are subject to public records law. We'll go over the public records law after I finish this presentation. So you get me for 2 presentations in a row. Aren't you all lucky? Okay, just a few more highlights that I want to point out, and then we will move on to the next thing so that we can get on to your legislative updates and the information that Lindsay has for us. To touch brief, let's see, next slide, please. Okay, to touch briefly on the executive sessions. There is still a noticing requirement for executive sessions. The public is not allowed to attend, but the media is allowed with limited exceptions, and no voting or decisions may be made within an executive session. And like I mentioned already, the advisory council in recent history, and as far as we have been able to find, has not held an executive session. So I think we'll be okay there. But should that question arise, please make sure you reach out to Rebecca and I so that we make sure we're in compliance with all of that. Next slide, please. In response to the pandemic and in-person meetings being canceled, Governor Brown enacted Executive Order 20-16. That executive order allowed us to hold public meetings virtually and still comply with the public meeting law. During the last legislative session, the legislature passed House Bill 4212 to help facilitate the public participation through electronic and virtual means. Also passed during the last session was House Bill 2560, which permanently enacts different pieces of the executive order. House Bill 2560, which was also passed, amends ORS 192.670 to expand remote participation of the public through the use of technology. Public meetings must provide opportunity to the extent reasonably possible for people to access and attend a meeting by telephone, video, or other electronic means. submit oral testimony by electronic or virtual means during the meeting, even if in-person oral testimony is allowed. If written testimony is allowed, then the public has to be given the opportunity to submit that also by electronic or physical means, so that you as a council can then consider any written testimony. Next slide, please. Okay, we're almost there. A quorum must be present for any decisions to be made during a public meeting. A quorum is a simple majority of members in attendance, and that depends on how big a council or a board or a commission is. Since we have, I think it's 10 members, right, Rebecca? Yeah, 10 members. So I would say that 5 or more is going to be your simple majority at that point, preferably 6 or more of you. So then we have a clear quorum. So that being said, everybody's subject to public meeting laws. So if you want to make sure, so you do want to make sure that outside of these meetings, there's never more than 5 of you gathering in some platform to have discussions about council business. This includes emails, coffee chats, and other meetings where a majority of you could be in attendance. If there's voting that needs to happen during the meetings, again, we've got to have a quorum. There is a public, it's a public guide for elected officials, or I'm blanking, sorry, on the title that the Government Ethics Commission has put out for all of us to have this all in language that we can better understand instead of in statutory language. So, and they also deal with any complaints that are filed and then investigate and follow up on those. Next slide, please. That's it. That's all I got for you on public meetings, unless there's any questions. Not seeing any. Paloma, do you want me to just continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned to all of you earlier, one of my roles here at the Employment Department is as the agency records officer. So that being said, I've prepared another high-level overview for all of you today regarding the public records law. Aren't you all lucky you get all of this all in one swoop? Yay, then we're done for a year. Okay, next slide, Jessica. Oregon's public records law can be hard to understand in some ways and easy in others. My basic rule of thumb is that if you create it in whatever medium you use, you have potentially just created a public record, like instant messaging for Skype or Microsoft Teams. We all have a habit of just chatting away in those. Guess what? They're all public records unless they're exempt, which most of them are not. So the Secretary of State's basic rule is they teach in their records management course is that every person has a right to inspect any record or any record of a public body except as otherwise expressly provided in ORS 192.338, 192.345, and 192.355. The Department of Justice has a list of over 600 exemptions, and OED has at least one on that list pertaining to the unemployment insurance records. Next slide, please. ORS 192 outlines the requirements for public records. The Secretary of State's office also helps with trainings on records management and public records and is the official approver and keeper of all retention schedules, which is what we're going to talk about now. Next slide, please. Oregon Administrative Rule, Chapter 166. Division 300 is the state agency general schedule that the Secretary of State's office develops. The state archivist grants authorization to agencies in the form of records retention schedules for the retention and disposition of public records in their custody. collaborating with the agency records officers of an agency, the state archivist considers the value of the public records for legal, fiscal, administrative, or research purposes. The general schedule, which is applicable to the records of all state agencies, where they apply the official copy of all public records, regardless of medium or physical format, created and stored by agencies. A state agency shall destroy public records that have met the terms and conditions of their scheduled retention period unless there is a litigation hold or something else preventing the destruction of a record. Each agency also has specific schedules that pertains to the agency's specific business records that are not covered in the general retention schedule. These schedules are referred to as the agency's specific schedule or a special schedule, or it could be any number of things. Everybody calls it something different, but as long as they don't call it the general schedule, we generally, us agency records officers, know what they're referring to. So each agency that has a specific schedule, those records pertain to the agency's specific business records that are not covered in that general schedule. These schedules have to be approved by the state archivist, and the schedules, when we develop those special schedules, they go through a pretty rigorous evaluation by the Secretary of State's office. We have to defend why we think that something should be held outside of what their retention is. If it's a record, like if it's a contract record that we think we should keep longer, or research documents or something like that. So these retention schedules are created and then updated regularly, again, working with the Secretary of State's office. And the same retention rule applies. Retain it until the schedule tells you to destroy it, and then destroy it. Even if a record is being retained outside of the retention period, it is discoverable under the public records request, unless it is one of those records that's an exemption. Next slide, please. Retention schedules are determined, retention periods, excuse me, are determined by the content of a record and not the format or medium that the record is created in. The Secretary of State's office looks at administrative, fiscal, and legal needs of a record, and they also evaluate the historical needs of a record when developing retention schedules. For example, our research division may have records that on a general schedule only need to be retained for 3 years. But for our business need, we may need it for 20 years instead. That's an example of something that would then be listed on our special schedule that we have for our agency. Once a record has reached its retention period, an agency has the legal right to destroy those records. Again, as long as there isn't a litigation hold or something else that is preventing an agency from destroying the records. Next slide, please. All right. On this slide, we have just a few. This is not an exhaustive list of public records that are subject to disclosure through the public records request. DOJ helps agencies decide what records can and cannot be disclosed when an agency requests that assistance. As you can see, pretty much anything that's not a verbal conversation that was not recorded is potentially a public record. To add to the decision-making of what is and is not a public record, it is the content of the record and not the format. Now, I know I've said that several times, but it gets really confusing. So for emails, for example, some may be destroyed immediately and some may need to be kept permanently because it depends on the content of the email. Likewise for meeting minutes and for other documents that you may receive. Depending on the content will depend on what kind of retention those are. Emails that you get that are like FYIs, CCs, informational notices. I know we all get spam, ads, and other sorts of email. unless you are the one that created that FYI or spam or the ad or whatever it is, then you don't have to retain that because you're not the creator of the information. Are you confused yet? Yeah, it's pretty confusing and certainly not straightforward. Okay, Jessica, next slide. We're almost finished. On your screen are the basics that I start with when thinking about a record and trying to decide if it's a public record or not. Here are some basics to remember. If it's in writing, it should be treated as a public record. If it's an audio recording, it should also be treated as a public record, except voicemails. Voicemails are a public record if they've been transcribed into an email or some other written form. If it's a video recording, it's a public record. Instant messaging, I know I said it once before, but that's a really good sticky point. You know, our text messages on our phones, Teams, Skype, whatever it is that you use, those could potentially be public records. And then to me, I err on the side of caution. I assume it's going to be a public record, and I'm never, ever afraid to ask if it's going to be or not. So if you guys ever have any of those questions, please let Rebecca and I know so that we can help you guys make sure everything's straight and that we're all in compliance. There are a lot more topics and parts regarding public records and public meetings, but I wanted to give you an overview today to just get you started thinking about it. And as you go about council business, so that you're aware that you could potentially run into a public meeting law question or situation where, you know, one of you needs to walk away or something, and then the public records and that you could potentially be creating a public record, even if it's on your home computer. So if you have any questions, please let Rebecca and I know. And one question I always ask myself if I write an email or I write a Teams message is, if this were to land on the front page of a newspaper, am I going to be okay with it? Or am I going to regret writing it? So this concludes my overview of the public records law. Thank you for your time. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to Rebecca and I with any questions any of you have about any of the stuff I've covered today. Paloma.
Thanks. Looks like Tom has a question.
Yeah, I do have one question, and it kind of relates more to the public meetings portion of your discussion. And that is, if someone should contact me or the other members of the council outside of a regular meeting and ask a question or ask for information, is there some common protocol that we should use to sort of refer that person to somebody in the department to answer the question, or to the chair of the council?
Yeah, so Rebecca and I talked about this a little bit in preparation of the meeting. So if you guys all get an email, like let's say somebody were to email each individual member of the council, but you're all CC'd on that same email with a question, I would ask, and Rebecca is going to ask, that you forward that to Rebecca and I at the OED Advisory Council email, so then we can then facilitate the communications individually between council members and get a response back to that individual without creating a public meeting.
And so to follow up that question, if one of us received an email asking about status of unemployment benefits or something like that, should we just send it along to you, or without advising them that we're sending it along?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, I would just say, yeah, go ahead, Rebecca. I think you can answer that.
I think that's a fair question, Tom. We have not published your email or your phone numbers, nor will we, on our website. So you know that, but people have a way of ferreting out information, that's for darn sure. So I think that if you were just to let the person know that you're forwarding their information request to the department and that you do not handle individual casework, that would be adequate.
All right, terrific, thanks.
And Tom, also, I would follow up with what Rebecca was saying, that I think it's fair and okay for you to respond and say, I don't have that information, so I'm going to forward it to staff that can help you.
Okay, thanks.
I did have a question about sort of the public records piece of it, and sort of what are, I mean, I understand if we're sort of creating records, but if we are, let's say, Rebecca and I are going back and forth on something, do I need to be keeping a separate file that is things I'm keeping? Or, okay, great.
No, I don't think so, because in that example, you and Rebecca are conversating, so Rebecca's going to have the record.
Because I've previously lived in the painful land of public record, and it's a real joy not to be part of it anymore.
Right, and then you stepped back into it by joining all these different advisory councils and stuff. But Paloma, if you ever have a question, just reach out.
Great, thanks. All right, so Tom, do you still have a question, or is your hand just still up? Okay. Next, I had a legislative update from David.
David Gens.
Dave Gens. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, everyone. I'm David Gens, pronouns he and him. I work in legislative affairs here at the Employment Department with Rebecca Nance. I'm just going to be providing you with a brief recap of what happened in the 2021 legislative session in terms of the Employment Department. I'm sure all of you may have your own perspectives on how session unfolded. We're just going to give you a quick summary of what happened here, and then also talk about upcoming legislative events and what the agency is doing to prepare for those. So first of all, the slide that's currently up is just a summary of how things unfolded. Session lasted 159 days. There was 2,500 bills that were introduced. Only 715 or 14 were passed. We as an agency had 344 bills we were tracking out of that larger number. Ultimately, only about 20 bills, I shouldn't say only, but 20 bills passed, which kind of had a more significant bearing on us, including but not limited to the unemployment insurance division. And although a session wasn't without its challenges for us, we really do think that we were able to represent the agency well, and that in the end it was a successful session for us. As probably many of you are aware, the legislative body introduced a slew of kind of new and permanent policy measures to provide relief to Oregonians during the pandemic, especially because of the negative consequences and the recession. Going into session, we had a fair amount of public scrutiny and legislative concern over how we were administrating the unemployment benefits. But we feel like, we were able to work closely with our stakeholders and the governor's office and the legislative body to find the right balance for our continued work of our programs. Legislative Affairs has a summary that's available on our website. I'm going to go ahead and just paste a link here in the chat. If for some reason you can't access it, feel free to let me know. Let's see, just pasting it now. You can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So in 2021, some measures that were impactful to us were several bills that we asked for. One of them was House Bill 3043, which gave us more access to DOR data we use this information to validate claims and identify potential fraud on pandemic unemployment assistance claims. This was a bill that we asked for because during the second special session of 2020, there was a bill that gave us the authority. However, that authority had expired by the time that the 2021 session began. So we asked for an extension of that information, and I believe we still currently have access to it, and we're using it to validate potential fraud risk with claims. Another bill that isn't listed here on this page, but I thought I should mention it as well, was one that we asked for, which is House Bill 3206. That was giving us authority to use our special fraud control fund, which is a fund of money that we maintain recovering from when we recover debts from people when they're overpaid. And this fund, we can only use it for certain purposes, and the legislation allowed us to use it to recover overpaid lost wage assistance benefits, which was one of those special programs that was enacted during the pandemic, the federal programs that was enacted. So that was an important measure as well. Additionally, going down the list here, there was House Bill 3178, which provides increased disregard of earnings for weekly UI claims. So this helps people get more money each week if they have earnings. So this was also something that was originally passed in the second special session, but we went back and worked with stakeholders and BOLI to make sure that it met the intent of the original legislation. So that was something that we did to help during the pandemic. And then, of course, House Bill 3389, which was probably one of the most significant pieces of legislation that the Employment Department has ever seen, at least that I'm familiar with. I'm not going to talk about that bill, though. I'm going to leave that for Lindsay to share. I wouldn't want to steal any of her thunder on that. So yeah, another bill that we had was Senate Bill 172, and this was a bill that the department didn't introduce, but we worked closely with our stakeholders on. Basically, it's a relief bill for unemployment insurance benefit recipients who are overpaid through no fault of their own, and gives us greater flexibility for waiving recovery of those benefits, and a few other tweaks too. And then there were kind of two sister bills that were proposed by the School Employees Association that expanded coverage for certain types of school employees. They're pretty specific and unique bills, but they were something that school employees had asked for. So we worked closely with stakeholder groups on that too, to ensure that we were able to provide the information that was needed for the legislative body to make their decisions. And then also, of course, our budget bill passed, and I think you've already heard a little bit about our budget and such, so I won't dwell on that. But you know, we had a lot of good conversations with the legislative body and with stakeholder groups about our administration of our various programs, and all those kind of conversations kind of fed into the approval of our budget. So we're in a good place there, and we believe we have the resources necessary for the next biennium. Lastly, just want to mention briefly, it's not on this slide, but another piece of legislation that was impactful for us was House Bill 3398, which was the bill that we asked for to extend the timelines of our paid family medical leave insurance program. This was something that was kind of necessary to adapt for the future, given the aggressive timeline that was originally proposed in House Bill 2005 in the 2019 legislative session. So I'm going to move on to the upcoming legislative events. Does anybody have any questions about anything in 2021, or do you need any additional elaboration? Okay, seeing none. So most of you are probably aware that we have legislative days coming up here in about a week. not next week, but the week after next. And as of right now, we know that we're going to be invited to give 2 presentations, one in the House Business and Labor Committee, and then another in the Senate Labor and Business Committee. The House Business and Labor Committee, that's already been scheduled. We don't know what time slot we're going to fit into. Both of those presentations are, for what we understand, for 30 minutes. These are the same presentations we would have been given in September, would the legislative days not have been canceled. So the House Business and Labor Committee presentation is going to be on, it's a joint presentation with the Department of Revenue and on our biennial interagency compliance network report. And that's something that Lindsay is going to be doing with our colleague, John Galvin at DOR. So yeah, that's the first meeting. And in this interim Senate Labor and Business Committee, Lindsay and David will be providing an update on the administration of UI benefits during the COVID pandemic and the implementation of reduced tax rates under the bill that I mentioned on the previous slide, House Bill 3389. So those are kind of 2 important updates that we're going to be providing. So in terms of the next set of legislative days in 2022, we don't have any information at this time about any committee presentations that we may be asked to participate in. And then, of course, as you probably know, the 2022 legislative session begins on Tuesday, February 1st and runs through Monday, March 7th. At this point in time, we don't have any concepts that we're intending to move forward, except for, as you may be aware, a concept that we are pursuing on behalf of the paid family medical leave insurance program with some tweaks, and we're still working on that, and others may have more to add on it. So that concludes the information that I was going to provide today. We do have a legislative affairs web page on our website that you can navigate through the agency. The agency's portal. I can go ahead and put a link into the chat. Before we say goodbye, do you have any questions or any follow-up concerns?
No, I look forward to hearing from Lindsay about 3389. It was a very confusing session to have both 3389 and 3398 in the same session. But I don't have any other questions.
Both being agency bills and having almost the same number, just yeah, that was tricky to navigate that for sure. All right, well, thanks everyone. A pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. I will turn over to Lindsay if you're ready.
I am, thank you. All righty, so good afternoon again. I'm going to take just a few minutes here to talk about House Bill 3389 that was passed in the 2021 session. Next slide, please, Jessica. Thanks. So House Bill 3389 was signed on July 27th of 2021 and provides unemployment insurance tax relief to Oregon employers in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The goal of the bill was to support Oregon employers, stimulate economic recovery from the pandemic, and maintain long-term solvency of Oregon's unemployment insurance trust fund. Next slide. Oregon legislators, the governor's office, and the employment department worked together to craft this bipartisan legislation that leverages Oregon's solvent UI trust fund. These changes use some existing trust fund reserves to provide a mix of short-term and long-term tax relief for Oregon businesses while protecting them against long-term risks of the UI trust fund becoming insolvent. Businesses most impacted by the pandemic, like restaurants or barbershops, and others that saw big increases in their experience ratings, will see the most relief. To say it another way, Oregon's UI Trust Fund was projected to continue being one of the most solvent trust funds in the nation, even without the passing of the bill. However, these changes help provide tax relief to Oregon employers without jeopardizing the solvency of the fund. And before I move on to highlighting some of the key provisions on the bill, I do want to take a moment and thank all of the stakeholders who worked on or provided valuable feedback on this bill. It was a lot of work and we really thank you. Next slide. So House Bill 3389 extends the look back period, which is used to determine solvency level from 10 to 20 years, which will enhance long-term UI trust fund stability to take a broader range of economic situations into account. And it avoids setting future UI trust fund balance targets based on the amount of benefits paid during the pandemic. Next slide. The same experience ratings used to determine employers' 2020 UI tax rates will be used to determine rates for 2022 through 2024. Tax rates may fluctuate due to tax schedule changes, but this provision essentially removes the pandemic period from the experience rating calculation. Next slide. To help provide some relief to Oregon employers during the pandemic, the department used its existing discretion to allow employers in good standing whose tax rates went up by 0.5% or more and who continued to make timely filings and make timely payment on non-deferred amounts to defer up to 1/3 of their taxes due for calendar year 2021 until June 30th of 2022 without accruing interest or penalties on the deferred amounts. House Bill 3389 puts that policy into law and reduces the amount of taxes collected by reducing the fund targets by about 10% overall. Next slide. For those that are eligible to defer and had a UI tax rate increase of 1% or more, the bill enables eligible employers full or partial forgiveness of their deferred 2021 taxes. The amount that can be forgiven is based on each employer's UI tax rate increase from 2020 to 2021. So increases of over 2% are eligible for 100% forgiveness. Increases of more than 1.5% but less than 2% can receive 75% forgiveness. And increases of more than 1% but less than 1.5% get 50% forgiveness. Next slide. The last provision I would like to highlight is the effect on the UI tax schedule. It's worth pointing out that despite the pandemic being the biggest strain on the UI system in our history, Oregon is not going to go above the equilibrium tax schedule 4. In 2022, we are in tax schedule 3 instead of 4, and we expect to be 2 schedules lower in 2023 through 2025 than we would have been without the passage of the bill. Next slide. To inform employers about this change, we've done a variety of outreach activities, including creating an informational webpage. We sent direct emails and mailers to employers, and we also posted on social media and among other items. Next slide. These changes from 2021 through 2029 are estimated to save employers $2.2 billion. We estimate over 92,000 employers will have a lower tax rate than they would have without these changes, which is about 62% of all subject employers. And 76,000 to 80,000 employers are projected to be eligible for UI tax deferral, which I'll go into over the next couple of slides. Next slide. To be eligible, employers must be in good standing, as I mentioned, with the employment department as of January 1st, 2021, and remain in good standing and have had a UI tax rate increase from 2020 to 2021 by at least 0.5% for deferral and 1% for deferral and forgiveness. Next slide. Employers do not need to apply to participate. The employment department has and will continue to contact employers throughout 2021 with updates on eligibility status or requirements. And employers must meet all the requirements for the entire 2021 tax year. However, if they do not do that, we will notify them that they are no longer eligible. Next slide. So I should note that after the third and fourth quarters of 2021 have been completed and reviewed, impact amounts and the number of eligible employers for prior quarters could change, but to date, $98 million of 2021 UI tax contributions are deferrable, of which $23 million are eligible for forgiveness, providing tax relief to over 80,800 employers. Next slide. So I'll wrap up with just a couple slides about UI trust fund solvency. Nationally, 12 states and territories have outstanding balances or were currently borrowing in late September of 2021, totaling over $45.5 billion. As Mike mentioned earlier, many states use CARES Act or ARPA funds to avoid or minimize borrowing money for their UI trust fund. However, Oregon was able to direct those funds to provide other needed support and relief to Oregonians. Employers in states that borrow money face increased UI tax burdens going forward to repay the borrowed funds, pay interest, and in some cases, they may lose the federal payroll tax credits as well. Next slide. Oregon's UI Trust Fund is a national leader, as I've mentioned before, providing exactly the type of counter-cyclical economic safety net it was designed to do. Our solvent fund allowed Oregon to weather the depth and breadth of the Great Recession, as well as the sudden impact of the pandemic recession, without having to borrow or incur more costs to Oregon employers. Instead, the fund was able to accumulate savings to mitigate the impact to Oregon business. House Bill 3389 takes advantage of Oregon's very solvent UI trust fund to provide much needed relief to Oregon employers while protecting them against those possible long-term risks of insolvency. Next slide. So thank you for your time and for listening to more fun presentations about tax relief and the trust fund. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Lindsay. I just wanted to express my thanks for employers for the department working on this legislation. It's incredibly important for everybody. And while it didn't make a big splash during the legislative session, I think we all know what a big deal it was. And David has a question or wants to say something.
I was just going to add a comment that I think one of the things that I've seen in talking to my colleagues in other states that Oregon should be really thankful for is the trust fund structure that we have, which the legislature set up originally a number of years ago, so it's self-balancing. But part of that, and this advisory council really plays a key role and has historically in giving advice to the legislature and to the department about that. Mm-hmm. The collaboration and the mutual focus from worker representatives and business representatives of making sure that we have a solvent trust fund, which saves everybody money over the long run. Not all states have that. And in states where they don't have that, ultimately it makes it harder to maintain benefits for the workers, and it ends up with employers having to pay extra borrowing costs. So I'm very appreciative of that dynamic. And I think it's something that doesn't get called out all that often, but really does support Oregon communities and the entire economy really well. And I'll also say that we were very fortunate in working on this bill. I think Bob may have left, but he and his team and some other folks just doing constant projections and evaluations of what if this gets tinkered with, what do we think it will do? And we're fortunate to have some really nationally well-recognized experts in Oregon that can do that kind of work.
Yeah, agree. Appreciate all of the work. I know that a number of us kept on asking all sorts of different questions. I'm sure that was a lot of fun for him and his team. All right, so next on our agenda is public comment, and at least last I heard, we don't have any folks signed up for public comment.
That is still correct, Madam Chair.
All right. So I will adjourn us unless anybody else has anything they want to add. Yeah, this was a long marathon of a meeting, especially to do virtually. Hope that we can I'll get to meet in person sometime soon. But appreciate everyone's time, and I will adjourn us for the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I was just hoping we could talk for 45 more minutes.
I mean, if it's really what you want.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with the extra 45 minutes. No. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Have a good one.